An American general demanded a salute from a British royal guard. The soldier didn't move, just clenched his fists as the crowd held its breath. What happened next stunned the world. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The morning had unfolded in typical London fashion. Moody clouds above, cool air thick with the scent of rain-soaked stone, and the murmurs of tourists fluttering like background static against the imposing elegance of Buckingham Palace. Behind the wrought iron gates, ceremonial guards stood arranged in rigid formation, each one an extension of a centuries-old tradition. Red tunics pressed to perfection, black bearskin hats towering above impassive faces, white-gloved hands at the ready, yet unmoving. Private First Class Daniel Reeves was the image of protocol. At 25, his frame was lean but hardened by discipline, his posture unyielding. Beneath the brim of the bearskin hat, his eyes, sharp, observant, stared forward with calculated emptiness. For Reeves, stillness wasn't just duty, it was armor. He had worn it in war, and now he wore it in peace. The calm shattered with the arrival of a motorcade, a black armored SUV flanked by two sleek diplomatic motorcycles roared into the perimeter. Security personnel tensed instinctively. Doors opened. Out stepped General Robert Langford. He moved with the bearing of a man who had never been told no. 62, tall and barrel-chested, Langford wore his U.S. Army dress uniform like a second skin. Silver service stripes gleamed down his sleeves. Polished metals draped his chest like a ledger of battle-tested experience. His voice cut through the courtyard like a drawn blade. "In the name of Allied respect, I expect a salute." Gasps erupted. The sea of tourists parted with stunned silence. Phones rose like antennae, ready to record. Reeves did not flinch. A ripple of discomfort passed through Langford's entourage. His aide, a nervous man in his 30s, leaned in toward the general, muttering something only partly audible. "Sir, he's not permitted." But Langford raised a hand, silencing him. His jaw tightened. "I'm not asking as a tourist," he declared louder. "I'm asking as a commander of your nation's closest ally." Still, Reeves didn't move. But something changed. Subtle, nearly imperceptible. His fingers curled inward. His jaw set harder beneath the brim. It wasn't fear. It was control. Deliberate. Absolute. The weight of centuries stood on his shoulders, and he carried it without a tremor. In that moment, the air thickened, not with sound but with scrutiny. What should have been a forgettable diplomatic stop had become a silent standoff, one that challenged not just protocol, but dignity. And Reeves? He remained stone. But inside that stillness, tension coiled like a spring. Inside the high-ceilinged corridors of the palace, the tension moved faster than the couriers. Within minutes of General Langford's voice echoing through the forecourt, a clip surfaced online, crisp, 23 seconds long. It captured the standoff in perfect clarity. A seasoned American general demanding a salute, a British guard unflinching, a crowd of bystanders holding their breath. The moment had passed, but the impact had only begun to detonate. What no one saw behind the static posture of Private First Class Daniel Reeves was a mind bracing for scrutiny. Again, before the bearskin hat and the ceremonial precision, Reeves had been a soldier in the field. Kandahar. Mud, dust, and the bitter percussion of gunfire in the air. He had marched under a different sun, carried comrades who didn't make it back, and once, for 36 hours, held a collapsed outpost with nothing but grit and dwindling ammunition. That kind of service doesn't leave. It embeds into the sinew, reshapes silence into a kind of speech. And Reeves. He chose the guard not for pageantry, but as an act of preservation, his own quiet way of continuing to serve in a role where presence itself was the weapon. So when Langford stood before him, decorated and direct, Reeves didn't just hear a request for protocol. He heard a test. "I expect a salute. Not a salute to alliance or duty, but to ego." The tone hadn't carried the cadence of shared respect between soldiers. It had carried pressure, authority, the kind that demanded deference without offering it back. To Reeves, it reeked of theater, a stage where he was meant to play the role of obedient prop. That night, the officers' lounge was nearly empty. Soft amber lighting washed over dark leather chairs and mahogany tables. Reeves sat near the window, helmet off, his hands resting atop his folded tunic. The crease down the front was still razor-sharp. His eyes, usually calm, were distant now, locked not on the viral footage playing on someone's phone across the room, but on the echo of the words that hadn't left him since morning. Major Samuel Trent entered without ceremony. A career officer with the hardened stare of someone who'd served too long to be rattled by public opinion, he took a seat beside Reeves. No lectures, no reprimand. "You did the right thing," he said, voice low and flat. Reeves didn't look up. "Then why does it feel like I just got turned into a controversy?" Trent didn't answer. He didn't need to. Some battles aren't fought in war zones. They're fought in silence, under pressure, in moments where integrity demands stillness louder than speech. As the footage continued its relentless orbit through media cycles, the fault lines of opinion carved their way across public discourse like fractures in glass. On talk shows and news panels, retired officers and political commentators clashed over etiquette, nationalism, and pride. The scene was replayed endlessly. General Langford, jaw set and medals gleaming, issuing his command. Private Daniel Reeves, immobile and mute, the living embodiment of British tradition. To some, Reeves's silence was defiance. To others, it was grace under pressure. In the digital trenches, opinion spiraled in every direction. Hashtags ignited across platforms. Hashtag respect. The uniform. Hashtag silent strength. Langford demand. Tweets exploded with polarized fury. Some condemning Reeves as insubordinate, others accusing Langford of imperial arrogance masked as camaraderie. Memes mocked, tributes emerged. Reaction videos dissected every breath and blink of the 23-second clip. Inside embassy walls, tension simmered. Langford's aides scrambled to contain the optics. Official statements were drafted and redrafted, each word weighed like ordnance. When the American embassy finally spoke, its tone was measured, an attempt to neutralize without apology. General Langford acted with the intent of mutual recognition, though not in accordance with local customs. It was diplomacy veiled in neutrality. But the public wasn't looking for policy. They were looking for meaning. And then, quietly, meaning arrived from the margins. Letters began arriving at Reeves's barracks, slipped under doors, forwarded through veterans' associations, posted anonymously online. They weren't written in polished PR language. They were raw, candid, from people who knew the weight of command, the strain of standing still in the face of expectation. "You reminded me of my father, who never saluted to win favor but stood his ground when it counted. Protocol without principle is just posturing. You chose the harder path." One letter stood out, handwritten on thick paper with a crest embossed at the top. It read only, "Well done, soldier." It was signed by a retired British general whose name had long been synonymous with military decorum. But the most unexpected voice came from within Langford's own family. His son, Michael Langford, 30, a low-profile embassy analyst known more for his policy reports than his tweets, broke his silence. He posted a single paragraph that cut through the noise with quiet clarity. "My father has served with honor. But what Private Reeves did today was also honor. Maybe we need to rethink what that word means." The post exploded. Within hours, it had been translated into 5 languages. Through it all, Daniel Reeves never gave an interview, never held a press conference, never raised his voice. He let the silence continue to do what words could not. The air that morning held the hush of ceremony, the kind that made even passing birds seem to fly quieter. Gray clouds hovered like watchful witnesses above the rows of polished boots and gleaming medals. The stone courtyard at the heart of the memorial grounds was lined with dignitaries, veterans, and silent spectators, their breath clouding in the cold November air. It was Remembrance Day, but this year, something unseen yet deeply felt crackled beneath the surface. Private First Class Daniel Reeves stood at attention, not beneath a bearskin hat, but in his formal service blues, every fold crisp, every button aligned, every gesture precise. At 25, he was no longer just the ceremonial figure from a viral standoff. He was now a soldier chosen to lay the wreath, shoulder to shoulder with generals representing more than tradition, representing restraint, integrity. To his left stood Major Samuel Trent, eyes forward. To his right, a row of British officers, followed by an American delegation, and among them, General Robert Langford. No medals today, no fanfare, just a plain Navy overcoat, his frame stiffer than usual, his jaw set in contemplative silence. He had accepted the invitation without fanfare, without press. But his presence alone sent ripples through the assembled ranks. As Reeves stepped forward with the wreath cradled in both hands, the crowd didn't move. Cameras were already raised, but not a shutter dared click. Each footfall echoed with the weight of 1,000 debates, millions of views, and a simple moment that had split public opinion wide open. He reached the monument, kneeled, placed the wreath, and then, deliberately, he rose, turned. His gaze locked onto Langford's. In that instant, time seemed to still. There were no speeches, no music, just 2 soldiers staring across the silence of their shared history. Reeves raised his hand in salute, a gesture that now held far more than protocol. It was grace, humility, and strength made visible. Langford blinked, chest rising with a quiet breath. Then, slowly, he returned the salute. His face was unreadable. No pride, no defiance, only something quieter and rarer, acknowledgement. A wave of emotion passed through the crowd like wind through flags. Then came Langford's final words, caught faintly by the microphones nestled nearby. "You reminded me what respect looks like when no one's watching. Thank you, soldier." The clip, shared within hours, traveled across borders, not as a spark of controversy this time, but as a moment of unity. And in a world often too loud to listen, one quiet act, one salute, became the answer to a question the world hadn't known it was asking.